On July 4, the White House's Domestic Policy Council released a long-awaited report titled Saving America's Story: How Ideological Capture at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History Erases Our Heritage. It's a sharp critique aimed squarely at the museum's leadership, accusing them of trading settled truths for what the report calls political activism and division. The document accuses the institution of engaging in anti-white activism, supporting illegal aliens, and embracing transgender people, accusations that the report frames as a deliberate discard of historical fact. The piece opens with a very clear political backdrop. Historians, the report reminds us, stick to evidence and never accept settled truths as immutable. Yet the White House has apparently decided that it wants the whole country, not just its own constituents, to live inside a bubble of its chosen narrative. The report decries that bubble as an egregious breach of public trust, labeling the White House's stance as a form of history policing. The article deftly points out that the report is not a scholarly work but a product of racial and political ideology. It claims that Trumpism often jokes about a return to the 1950s, a period the administration seems to romanticize as an era of unchecked greatness. The report, in turn, tries to paint the nation's past before the 1950s as effectively erasing events that don't fit its tidy narrative. The report draws on the museum's own historical founding statements. Back in 1953, the Smithsonian's leadership lobbied for a national museum that would commemorate our heritage of freedom and highlight the basic elements of our way of life. 2 years later, Secretary Leonard Carmichael famously described the institution as the nation's unique history book of objects and said it would instill in each citizen a deepened faith in our country's destiny as champion of individual dignity and enterprise. President Lyndon Johnson, on the day the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Voting Rights Act of 1965 were signed, spoke of a museum that would kindle patriotism but also acknowledge the agony and the sweat of the human spirit, a nod left by the great writer William Faulkner. Rabidity that the report covers gives no context for some of the era's defining moments. It fails to list events such as the Soviet achievement of the hydrogen bomb, Sputnik, the Korean War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the March on Washington, or the assassination of President Kennedy. If the Domestic Policy Council had consulted trained historians, it might have placed the museum's mission in the proper Cold War and civil rights liturgy. What we read here is exactly what the report says. The Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, once a monument to freedom and democracy, has been captured by a political ideology that the report sees as fundamentally anti-white and problematical. The White House has a right to its own perspective, but this document argues that it oversteps by imposing that view on America's public institutions. That's the crux of the critique. And that's a wrap for today's deep dive. If you're curious about how institutions that shape our understanding of history are being contested, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and keep the conversation going. See you next time.